So, how similar is Kentucky to West Virginia? Well, in fact, a substantial amount of the population of Kentucky is a part of a border city. Cincinnati and Louisville together make up 35% of the population of Kentucky. I think that the following map is a pretty strong argument that Clinton ought to be favored in these cities, and that if she loses those cities, we can talk about shifts in voting intentions. So let's have a good look at this map here. Okay, you see that? Okay, so that little crevice there is where Cincinnati is. I think it's, let me get my, focus on, I'm not gonna get my little, yeah, okay. So that little crevice there is where Cincinnati is, and it's about 10% of the population of Kentucky. That little crevice there is where Louisville is, and it's about 25% of the population of Kentucky. Okay? And you'll note that these are cities, so Louisville is here, but it's also here, right? So these blue areas are, the blue is Clinton, those blue areas are part of Louisville, and those blue areas there are part of Cincinnati, right? Meaning that we already know how the people of Louisville and Cincinnati voted previously. Back in March, Cincinnati voted for Clinton, and last week Louisville voted for Clinton. And is there a typo? There is a typo there, how about that? Okay. So, if it happens to be that next week, the people in Cincinnati, especially, vote for Sanders, then we would see that something has changed, right? And in fact, it would really be a smoking gun. Half of Louisville already voted for Clinton, and half of Cincy did too. So we actually have the privilege of a nearly apples to apples comparison. If she wins the Ohio side of Cincinnati in March and loses the Kentucky side in May, well, that strongly suggests that her support is actually caving. But in the end, it was last week, so how can you really expect different results, right? Nothing's happened in the last week. Lexington is another city in Kentucky that houses another 20% of the population, and it's like, let's go back to the map there. So Lexington is like here, right? So you go over that way, and it's like if you extended right angles, they would meet at a right angle. We don't need to talk about geometry here. We can just say, okay, it's right about there. Okay. It's barely outside the population of either city, right? So that's really a tri-state area. That's a very large metropolitan area, right? Sorry, a tri-city area. So why would anybody expect significantly different results there as well? So now you're around half the population of this entire state in those three cities, right? Whoever wins that area will win the state. Now, I still haven't seen any polling in Kentucky, but I do think that the graphic of Indiana glued to Ohio that I just showed you makes it clear as day, okay, that if she doesn't carry that Tri-City area, then she's definitely bleeding support. Even some mixed results are going to point in that direction, right? So if she does win Louisville, but loses Cincinnati, that's going to be real iffy, right? There may be remnant excuses in the rest of the state. I think that the very far eastern part of the state may be a little bit like West Virginia, right? But know that I've also attached a combination of Tennessee and Virginia, and I'm going to show you that. Okay. Again, the lines aren't perfect, so you want to maybe rotate Virginia over a little. But Kentucky's right there, and look at Tennessee. It's just a sea of blue, right? So I've attached that as well, and I think it pretty clearly implies that she should win the southern parts of Kentucky as well, right? I mean, what changes on the border there? There's not even a river or anything, and there isn't. It's just like I, maybe there's a fence, maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just like walking across the street, and then you're in one state or the other. Like there's nothing that changes, right? It's about as arbitrary as the Sykes-Picot line. So how's she going to sweep Tennessee like that and then lose Kentucky? Wouldn't be as much of a smoking gun, but it would be a pretty strong argument that she's losing support in her base, right? So if you wake up, if we get the results back from Kentucky, and we see a big gradient with blue on one side of the line and green on the other, it's going to question, how current the results in Tennessee were. Might he do better in Tennessee if they did a different vote tomorrow or someday after that, right? It may be that some of the counties in the very east of the state are lost in the same kind of non-reality that exists in West Virginia. Okay, so if there's a part of Kentucky that's like West Virginia, it'll be in the east, but it would be relatively like the population would be a lot less. It would be just a small part of it, right? And so I do think I've convinced myself that we can make some real conclusions from Kentucky, regardless of what Clinton said or how important it is. Okay. So even if it is because of something Clinton said, it would still imply that she's leading support, okay? Losing Louisville at least is going to suggest that the campaign should go into crisis mode. It's also going to suggest that Sanders' argument is strengthening, not weakening. But, again, I've said this 3 states in a row now. I said I don't really see any reason she'd lose Indiana. I said I don't really see any reason that she'd lose West Virginia. And I really still don't see any reason that she'd lose Kentucky. And I don't see any reason why it wouldn't look like the map of Tennessee. Okay? Again, all of the evidence that I've seen points in the direction that she should win by a substantial margin in Kentucky. But again, all of the evidence suggested she should win by substantial margins in Indiana and West Virginia. The polling in Indiana even suggested that she was going to win. The polling in West Virginia there wasn't really any good polling. And I haven't seen any polling at all in Kentucky. Okay? So we don't have any direct evidence. But at this point, I see no reason to argue that Sanders should have any chance at all in Kentucky. She should win the state handily. But let's take a look at this map again here. This is a smaller version of the Ohio-Indiana map. So there's Ohio, there's Indiana. I know Americans aren't good at geography. And you'll notice something. You see where that little white sliver is? Ohio should be rotated a little so that they actually touch. But you'll note that it's all blue on the Ohio side and all green on the Indiana side. The primaries were similar. Really, the only difference is that Ohio voted in March and Indiana voted in May. If Ohio were to vote tomorrow, would it still be that blue? Or would all of those places, look. It's a clear split. And what changes on that line? Nothing changes there. The only thing that's changed is time. Right? Where the vote is located in time. I think that's compelling in itself. Okay, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that's not evidence of a shift in voting intentions. And hence, if he does manage to win in Kentucky, or win pockets of Kentucky that are close to the Ohio and Indiana borders, or Tennessee border for that matter, okay, then it's time to start talking about the Clinton campaign being in free fall, right? Now these are states that she'll probably lose anyways, or at least that she would probably expect to lose under any normal circumstance. Um, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, these are red states, right? But there are also states, they're not that far from Arkansas, and Trump is, of course, widely seen as toxic. It's maybe not in her electoral math, but it should still be taken seriously that she's losing support there, because if she is, it's going to transfer elsewhere. Right? So yeah, is Kentucky similar to West Virginia? I don't think so, or not broadly speaking, probably not. Most of the population in Kentucky is located in areas that are going to be more comparable to Ohio, Indiana, or Tennessee. And all the evidence points towards Clinton winning. If she doesn't, it's going to be a crisis. Most people probably won't pick up on it, but you'll notice that my analysis has consistently been very different. See, normally you don't swing back, right? You wouldn't swing from Clinton to Sanders and then back to Clinton again. So if Sanders is swinging, it might be long term, right? Let's see what happens before we jump to any conclusions. But I'm telling you that I don't care what the racist models say. She should be favored to win in Kentucky. It's not an anomaly like West Virginia is. It looks like a normal state, and if she loses it, then it's bad news for her.